So I'm a big fan of first-party PlayStation titles. I love those games, and I do appreciate that Sony gives their PlayStation teams and studios the creative autonomy to make the games that they want to make, and that's why I think in large part we get such high-quality results from PlayStation first-party titles. But the flip side to that coin is that Sony sometimes, especially when it comes to executive decisions, just can be anti-consumer. You know, there's the whole awful refund policy aspect to the PlayStation ecosystem, the inconsistency censorship policies, the lackluster game preservation that led to backlash that made Sony realize that closing the PlayStation 3 and PlayStation Vita stores without game preservation solutions was a big mistake, and so after backlash, they had to backtrack on that. Another major topic that Sony has wrapped itself around with controversy is crossplay. Recall that Sony showed quite a bit of resistance and were kind of the last ones amongst the big three to join the fray of crossplay. Xbox and Nintendo were cooperating on that front. Sony showed resistance. Recall that back in June of 2017, it was reported that Sony was not allowing Rocket League and Minecraft to do crossplay on PlayStation with other platforms, while other platforms did allow it, and the excuse that executives provided was that we have a contract with the people who got online with us, that we look after them, and they're within the PlayStation curated universe, exposing what in many cases are children to external influences we have no ability to manage or look after. It's something we have to think about very carefully. Basically, their excuse was, think about the kids, which was so obviously a complete bull-faced bullshit lie. Plenty of people ripped this excuse apart, and just about everyone saw through the lies. Nobody bought this for a second. It was clearly a business-related decision where they didn't want people to spend money on other platforms. Games that have crossplay will allow you to play on PlayStation, but maybe buy microtransactions on PC or Xbox or Switch, and so Sony didn't want to share that aspect. They figured it might lead to revenue loss. It was about the money. That's what it was ultimately about. The controversy got even bigger the following year when on June of 2018, Sony blocked Fortnite crossplay between PlayStation 4 and Nintendo Switch players. Fortnite at this point had become like the biggest game ever, basically. The amount of attention on Fortnite was pretty significant, and so word really got around about Sony's kind of stinginess on the crossplay front, and how this was ultimately detrimental to the customer experience because players on PlayStation want to play with players on Switch, and not everyone can afford all of the platforms out there. But much like with the closures of PlayStation 3 and PlayStation Vita stores, the issue got enough backlash that Sony eventually was forced to take a step back. On September of 2018, Sony finally enabled Fortnite crossplay for PlayStation 4 against Xbox and Switch. Now, the reason I'm bringing up crossplay is because this is a topic that has resurfaced after the Epic versus Apple lawsuit legal battle that's currently ongoing unveiled documents highlighting that Sony was very resistant to the idea of crossplay, and when they did give in and cave on that front, they implemented a policy that would charge developers and publishers for crossplay. So this was information relayed by various news outlets. The headline reads, Sony really hated PS4 crossplay. Confidential documents reveal Epic Games was trying to force Sony to budge. One of the first things that the article highlights is an email exchange between Epic and PlayStation, or the folks at Sony, urging them to change their stance on crossplay so that they could engage in a win-win business partnership. The email reads as follows: we love working with PlayStation and we want this to be a win-win. The longer this drags out, it will be less so. I can't think of a scenario where Epic doesn't get what we want. That possibility went out the door when Fortnite became the biggest game on PlayStation. Here's what I propose. Number 1, we give you the data you are asking for plus the marketing data ask. 2, Epic deeply integrates Sony's esports API into Unreal Engine 4 as an engine-level feature. We market and advertise it as a first-class citizen of the engine. Maybe E3 announce, and we supported in Fortnite. 3. We announce crossplay in conjunction with Sony. Epic goes out of its way to make Sony look like heroes. You get to pick the when, where, how. So Epic was aware of the kind of backlash Sony was facing, and Sony making the announcement that, you know what, we have decided to change our minds would kind of make people go, okay, well, that's good. Sony changed their minds. Good on them. And that's kind of what Epic was proposing here. You guys get good PR out of this. And the rest of the list, bullet points, other benefits that they would give to PlayStation in exchange for enabling crossplay. The email concludes with, let's make this a huge win for us all. Epic's not changing its mind on the issue, so let's just agree on it now, Joe Creener. So Epic definitely did a bit of strong-arming here, saying we're not going to change our minds on this. Let's make this a win-win. And the possibility of Epic not getting what it wants flew out the door when Fortnite became the biggest game on PlayStation. Basically saying Fortnite and our endeavors are too big for you to reject our offer. But it would seem as though Sony didn't agree. Gio Corsi, Sony Senior Director of Developer Relations at the time, responded with, cross-platform play is not a slam dunk no matter the size of the title. As you know, many companies are exploring this idea and not a single one can explain how cross-console play improves the PlayStation business. Keyword here, not the PlayStation community, not the PlayStation ecosystem, the PlayStation business. How does this make us money is basically the question he was asking. So that time, Sony said that this was about protecting the children. We really know for sure it was complete bullshit with this email making its way into the public eye. And this statement right here really highlights the short-sightedness of executives who are only focused on the money and don't seem to comprehend the value of customer, consumer, and community goodwill. That's what you would get out of this. As Xbox and Nintendo are enabling this feature, you are trying to get in the way of that, and so who ends up looking like the bad guy? PlayStation. It's a feature that the gaming community has been asking to be normalized for ages, and Sony was the most resistant of the companies. Not saying that businesses aren't allowed to make decisions that are business smart, but you have to find that middle ground between consumer friendliness and business decisions so that everyone can win. Because if you lean too much towards business and consumers feel like they're starting to lose out on something like crossplay, a feature that should be universal and fortunately has become more and more universal, then you're going to get backlash from the people who are actually spending money on your products that make you the revenue and profits that you're seeking. Now, as I previously mentioned, Sony did eventually cave, and I highly doubt it was out of the kindness of their hearts. It was because they were getting negative PR, because the community pressured them into finally caving, and they did, which highlights the importance of the gaming community being respectfully but critically vocal about things that they don't agree with. Now, when Sony did finally cave to opening themselves up to crossplay, turns out that that came with caveats for developers and publishers. It turned out that Sony implemented a policy that would allow them to charge these publishers and developers if certain conditions were met with cross-play implemented games. So here are the details as detailed by a document entitled Cross-Platform Policy Requirements and Process from August 2019 that was revealed as part of that Apple versus Epic or Epic versus Apple lawsuit that is currently ongoing. And what this document details is that it forced publishers to pay Sony a royalty whenever PlayStation players contribute more than a certain percentage to the bottom line of a cross-platform game to offset the reduction in revenue. So this is the slide, the document in question, and the bullet points read as follow. If the proportion of PlayStation Network revenue share divided by PlayStation 4 gameplay share for a title is less than 0.85 in any given month or less than 85% in any given month, the partner will pay Sony Interactive Entertainment a royalty to offset the reduction in revenue. So say a game on its first month generates $1 million worth of cross-platform revenue and 900,000 of that revenue occurred on PlayStation Network. Because that is above the 85% threshold, 90%, the cross-platform revenue share would be $0. Developers and publishers of that cross-platform game wouldn't have to pay Sony. But if only $600,000 of that $1 million cross-platform revenue was from PlayStation Network and the rest was on other platforms, that's 60% of the cross-platform revenue that went to PSN, and because of that, there would be a charge of $52,500 in this particular scenario with this kind of revenue. And this $52,500 figure was determined with the following formula that PlayStation provided, which basically says that 15% of the difference between the overall cross-platform revenue and PlayStation Network's revenue, or basically 15% of any revenue that this cross-platform game earned outside of PlayStation Network, is what PlayStation is owed if PSN accounted for less than 85% of the overall cross-platform revenue. And so what this basically is a tax on developers who decide to implement crossplay should revenue share not be where Sony wants it, which is just something that no other platform holder is doing. Only Sony is doing this, and this is kind of going out of its way to somewhat discourage the implementation of crossplay. And it was Epic CEO Tim Sweeney who, in a testimonial, confirmed that Sony is in fact the only platform holder that requires this compensation for crossplay, and an exact quote was relayed here: in certain circumstances, Epic will have to pay additional revenue to Sony. If somebody were primarily playing on PlayStation but paying on iPhone, then this might trigger compensation. And then finally, the article relays that Epic had to agree to pay these additional fees to Sony in order to enable crossplay in Fortnite. So the reason that this right here happened back in September of 2018 wasn't strictly because Sony had a change of heart from Backlash, but also because they managed to squeeze a little deal out of this. Now, let's get one thing straight. I don't feel bad for Epic Games in any way, shape, or form. I don't feel bad for the mega-rich, multi-billion-dollar corporation. But at the same time, I do think what Sony is doing here is wrong and ultimately detrimental to the overall video games industry landscape and ecosystem. This is just something that shouldn't be normalized. Indie studios or smaller studios, they count every penny. You know, for them, money doesn't just come easily. They really need as much revenue share as they can get, and Sony taking a piece of that pie simply because that developer added crossplay and made a certain amount of revenue, you know, that's just not a great policy to implement. Now, it does say right here that payments commence on the month the title exceeds or is expected to exceed $500,000 in PSN gross revenue within a 12-month period. So it's only when a game crosses $500,000 in PSN gross revenue that these calculations begin to be applied, and that's when considerations are made on whether Sony gets a cut of that based on cross-play revenue performance. But games are expensive to make, especially for smaller studios, indie studios, single-A, double-A developers, and they could use every bit of money they can earn in order to kickstart their next project. And if Sony's going to interfere with that by asking a cut of that pie, money that is valuable to those smaller developers, again, that's just ultimately not a good thing. And this is a storm that big developers like Epic can ride, but this might affect smaller developers much more significantly, which is why I'm ultimately glad that Tim Sweeney did bring this up and did expose this aspect of Sony's current business model when it comes to crossplay. I don't know if this is still a thing because this is a document from 2019. I don't know if policies have changed on that front, but Epic CEO Tim Sweeney didn't say anything to that effect. He just said that Sony is the only platform holder that requires this compensation. It would seem as though this is something that still applies, something that nobody's really talked about, but it would seem as though, from what I understand, this policy is still in place. And if it is, Sony, you need to get rid of it. Even Nintendo isn't being stingy about crossplay, which says a lot given Nintendo executives tend to be pretty stingy and stubborn about certain policies or business decisions that many members of that community just don't agree with, and Nintendo is heavily criticized for. If you're really all about power to the players, play has no limit, all of these slogans actually show it by pursuing consumer-friendly endeavors, by not trying to discourage something as basic as cross-platform play, something that unifies the gaming community as a whole, trying to put a wedge in that just for a few extra bucks on the side. Unify the gaming community instead of dividing it for the sake of profit. Do that as much as possible. Do that within reason. But that's just one man's take. Let me know in the comments below what you think about the way Sony has implemented these crossplay policies that allow them to charge publishers and developers if they reach a certain threshold or meet certain conditions. Share your thoughts in the comments below, and to be further updated on all things gaming news, reviews, and discussions, stay tuned right here on Young Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Young out.